after Reverend Pamela shared the first, there are actually 4. So if you want to go onto YouTube, you can look for Pioneers, and Mykal can send out the links this week if people want to look it up and explore it a little bit more deeply. I wanted to do it because, as I said last week in our discussion, I was hesitant to bring it forward as a white man, because what right did I have to it? But then Pamela kind of opened the door for me by sharing it last week. I wanted to have that there as the foundation for the talk around the common good, because oftentimes the notion of common good is very difficult to grasp. As Mykal was reading the reading, it can get encumbered by philosophical and practical implications. How is it that we find what the common good is? There's so much argument. Is this good or is this good? How many times do we find ourselves puzzling and wrestling with the simple question, am I good enough? Am I enough? If we come to that question and we don't break through that, it becomes much more difficult to ever bring it up into a communal setting. How do we identify what is good for all of us when we can't even figure out what's good for us individually? How many times have people told us, this will be really good for you, Stephanie, and you are experiencing it and you're like, I don't know that this is really good for me. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm projecting. I know that people have said, this will be really good for you. I remember to the wedding day with my ex-wife, people said, you look a little concerned. This is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. And on this happiest day of my life, people are saying, you look a little concerned. And there was so much going on for me that was completely unconscious. One of my groomsmen, who had been my roommate in college, was going to be leaving about an hour into the reception. And he didn't have the courage at the time to tell me he was leaving so that he could go to the gay pride parade. So this was my roommate, and he didn't feel confident or comfortable enough to say, hey, you two, great, good work. I'm now going to celebrate who I am. I can be in celebration of you, but I also want to be in celebration of me. How many times do we come into situations like that, where there's a sense of conflict, where there's a sense of, am I good enough? Is this good enough? Is this a situation where I can name what I think is my truth? And then there's that. How many times have we gotten up and we've declared our truth, and in that declaration we see people squirming, and sometimes their squirms are there's righteous squirming, because they know that the good that we are proclaiming, that the identity that we are naming, is not altogether complete. In looking at the common good, I want us to consider 3 spiritual practices for engaging in, being present to, and living into the common good. So I've got 3 W's for you, because that way it's a little bit easier to manage. There's waiting, there's watching, and then there's wading in. Waiting, watching, and wading in. So for the notion of waiting, the person that wrote the proposed notes for this week presented the ideas from a speaker named Parker Palmer. And Parker Palmer created a political essay around the greater good. And one of the things that he drew attention to is that after the events on 9/11, that the United States, in the midst of this horrific event with the destruction of the Twin Towers, with the attack on the Pentagon, with really the first time that there was what appeared to be outward aggression against us here on our own soil. And again, I'll put in parentheses, what appeared to be. And how quick we were to seek retribution. We did not even allow much of the way, instead of just going through grief, we went directly to, the stages of grief. We went directly to anger, and righteous anger. And it's like, take them down. And what Parker Palmer was suggesting is that perhaps that leaping before we looked, has engendered a lot of ongoing harms. One of the things that Parker Palmer wrote was holding tension for grappling with the problems around us. Imagine standing as the tragic gap, the necessity of holding the space between that which is and that which we see as could or should be. We transform the world to the degree that we are transformed by making choices after having fully open, broken hearts become more life-giving than death-giving. How often do things happen to us and we are told to stand up and fight for yourself? I mean, I remember the notion, don't let yourself be bullied. Don't let anybody do anything to you. You show them that you're the boss. Show them that they can't get one over on you. Those kinds of messages. How much, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you think that, don't let anyone have anything over on you, how much do you think that orientation contributes to the common good? So we've got the scale of 1, we've got the scale of 10. 10 is, yes, this is completely contributing to the common good. 1 is, I'm not sure how much that's contributing to the common good. In fact, it might be taking away from the common good. Where would people put it? You can use your fingers as a gesture. How would you say? Oh, you're going to give it a 0, so you're going to the other end of the scale. Mark's going to give it the 1 at the lower end of the scale. I've got a kind of universal for here sense of that's not really. It's the one side of things. The challenge is that there's very little in our cultural dictates. There's very little in our upbringings. There's very little in the messages about what it means to be in the world that encourages that kind of reflection. That's why I'm inviting us to that practice of wait. I mean, I can speak to myself. There are times that I have just jumped into things without waiting. And then afterwards, I feel regret that I might have taken such an aggressive stance. Instead of waiting to navigate it, instead of waiting to think, what is happening in their mind that this is going on? Or at least asking, what are you thinking? and not in a diminutive, what the are you thinking? I think I shared with you, I had a colleague who needed to leave the job because her mother is dying. And she got a message saying, we understand your circumstances, and we just want to let you know that your leaving may eventuate in our contacting the state so that your licensure can be pulled.
Oh.
So I was horrified. I was enraged. I was definitely in the aggress and attack against, because I thought, how is this contributing to the common good? Here's a person facing something so difficult, and instead of a supportive, responsive setting, they're getting this kind of message, which just is, let's throw some fuel onto the fire. But by asking it as a question rather than coming out in full attack mode, who do you think you are that you would do this? But to ask, I'm really confused. I don't understand how this kind of approach is advancing us as an organization. Help me understand, help me see what's going on. When I frame it that way, I didn't get the same kind of response that I've gotten in the past to some of my more aggressive ways of fighting for the members that I represent as a union rep. It was funny because I had somebody say, "Oh, Vaughn's on it. They're scared of you." And I was surprised to hear that, because I don't really feel like a particularly scary person. I don't wake up in the morning and look and say, practice the growly face. For me, there was that notion of waiting a little bit and reframing it, asking the question, instead of just simply, how dare you? How awful are you? That blaming, that shaming, that whole track that we can go into. Parker Palmer invited us as agents of the common good to be that bridge, that space between what is and that space of what could or what should be. Now, how many people are familiar with the difference between could and should? I'm seeing some nods. The notion of should is that moral, what should happen? What should I be? What should I do? How many of us, after the fact, and we've heard the message, don't should on yourself. Mm-hmm. I would like to separate it from some of the prejudice that has come to the should, and look at should from that moral, ethical position. How is it that we ask ethically, what should come forward here? Because I think when we ask it from that perspective, we're really asking for what is rooted in that place of common good, rather than a directive of, you need to do this, and if you don't do this, then you're not good enough. But that notion of what is the morally highest and best that we can seek in this situation. I would propose that we can't get there if we're not willing to wait a little bit, waiting in the discomfort of what is going on. I talked about the second thing as watch. Okay? So watch, there is a class that we have not offered here yet, but there's a class called Contemporary Application of Science of Mind. One of the assignments that people participate in on a daily basis is that they look for some news article that hurts the heart. Now it shouldn't be hard. I mean, this is an assignment that people are, that, you know, I don't know that really. I mean, all you have to do is scan what, 3 down on Facebook, and you'll see something that's going to be heart hurting, or just go online. Heartbreak. February. What's today? The 24th. Heartbreak. February 24th, 2019. I suspect that the stories that we could access would surprise us. The reason that this gets proposed is that sometimes one of the ideas in science of mind that has been advanced is the notion of don't get caught up in all that negativity. Don't get drowned out by the negativism that's going on in the news. If we're not part of it, then we can't be contributing to it. The only problem with that is it can also be a little bit like the ostrich sticking its head in the sand. Because if we don't know what's going on, we can't come from a place, we can't come from a perspective of wholeness. We can't come from a place of blessing. We can't come from a place of good if we've just how many times do we feel like it's monkey see no evil, monkey hear no evil, monkey speak no evil? So the invitation is to find this news story. And the way the assignment goes is look at it and think of the opposite. So find an opposite word for this event. And the example that they gave was these girls in a school in India where girls cannot be educated, and the doors were barred and the children were burned inside. And they had the picture of 2 of the girls hugging each other. And think of the opposite of that hate is love. I don't know that I would ask for that. I don't know that I would propose that as the solution. That love is enough, because there was something that could engender that kind of cruelty. There was something that could make that person believe so deeply in the restriction on what girls should have. I don't know, there might have been, it might be about power. It might be about that person felt so powerless at the prospect of women advancing. That person felt so threatened. I say that the proposal of the opposite is love, and in my case it might be power. The way each of us come to that common good is that we all have our own unique ways of being in the world. So we'll all come forward with what it is that we are called to bring to that situation. What is it that our soul, what is it that our heart has to share, has to bring to bear in those situations that we find before us? So there's a little bit of an assignment here. If you choose, try it. Try to take on a story that is just, it hurts your heart to hear about it. And bring it into heart and consider what was not present that this could happen, and what might I make myself a vehicle that more of that presence comes forward because of my bringing it to mind, of my bringing it to heart, of my bringing it to bear. So how many people think that they might be able to find a new story? And to just be present to it, and to bring a bigger space. I think you probably all heard the story about, they drew a circle and they left me out. I drew a bigger circle and drew them in. So I'm asking for that. I'm asking that in those stories, which are all about closing us out, shutting us down, disempowering us, what circle can we draw? What good might we contain within the circle of our own lives that we share out through our actions, through our intentions? I'm not asking everybody to now get out and then promote power. That might be what we feel called to do. It might be that we simply contemplate it. How we live with it is really a personal choice. And to be okay with what that choice is. The final thing that I want to talk about is wading in. If we're wading in, we're willing to be in the midst of it. We're willing to be in the thick of it. How many times when somebody reaches out for us, are we willing to be there for them? I know that everybody here has done that. Everybody here has been that. That we have found people in our lives who need us, and we are willing to be present to them. We are willing to move mountains to make that happen. The other side about wading in, though, is, are we willing to let someone wade in with us? How? I can speak for myself. It has felt so good to be the giver. It has felt so good to be the person that's helping, the person that is supporting, the person that is providing. And sometimes those actions may not be empowering a person. Sometimes that way of being with someone may actually be disempowering them. That's why I say wading in, because it can be sloppy work. I talked about my hesitance to show the black lives that have made a difference in the science of mind, because I felt like, what right do I have? And the thing is that sometimes when I wade in bringing these things forward, I'll be sloppy about it and I won't get it right and I'll do it wrong. Wading in means getting messy. There was a Mr. Monk episode on yesterday, and Mr. Monk was being hugged by a nudist. So Mr. Monk, at the end of the episode, just walks straight directly into the ocean. She's like, should I get you a wipe? And he's just walking through the sand, which is, a Mr. Monk phobia, directly into the ocean, because it's like, that was going to be better. Getting overcome by the ocean was going to be a better experience than having been hugged by that naked person. So, sometimes it's that willingness to confront fears that are bigger than what we've had before. Sometimes it may mean opening ourselves up to others. Sometimes it may mean opening us up to the deepest of ourselves. Now, I heard this song this morning, and I wanted to share it because what I'd like us to consider as we listen to it, it's called You Say. You Say. And the way that it's written, it's the you as in God. And as New Thought people, we also know that the you God is the innermost God, the highest God that lives in us and through each of us. Sometimes it's great to have something bigger out there that's upholding us. And sometimes it may be knowing that intimacy of the divine within us. So I just ask us to be present to this as a way of accessing the greater good, as a way to be present, to be vehicles through which the greater good can come into being. So, as this plays, we'll also do the offertory collection, but just be present to the you say as that which can be outside of us, because sometimes we just don't have enough. We're at the end of our ropes. We've given everything we can give, and we don't think we've got anything left. And sometimes it's letting us be open to another who can help us. And maybe that other is the divine that lives inside. Maybe it's the divine that lives in another outside. Maybe it's in something even bigger than we've ever imagined. A possibility that we just didn't know.